You're tuned in to the world of Tom, where you catch all the facts and stay connected to Tom Lane.
Program.
I know a lot of times.
Me, look at you look all cute. Okay. Welcome to In the World of Tom's Breaking News Thursday. I'm Tom Lane, and this evening I am sitting with the Black mothers of Black doulas right out of Missouri to bless your delivery or mini deliveries. Starting with Keesha King, who is a wife, a mother of four, owner and operator of Sacred Borders Company, LLC. She is a native of Jefferson City, Missouri, and a graduate of Lincoln University. Keisha's personal journey through four births led her passion for birth work. She is a full spectrum doula, placenta and capitalization specialist, and American Red Cross authorized provider. And I'm very glad to have Miss Keesha King with us this evening. I also have Miss Netta Ward, who has a master's in public health and is a native of St. Louis, Missouri, with a background and passion in health education, maternal and child health. She is a graduate of the greatest HBCU in the Midwest, which is Lincoln University of Missouri, with a bachelor's in health and wellness. She received her full spectrum doula certification through Jamai Birth Village in 2016, becoming a vital pillar of the community. Hey, y'all. Had to get through all of it.
Yeah, you did great. You did great. For it to be like,
Yeah. Well, it's so great to have you guys. It's great to have this conversation. I think this is a well overdue conversation that's been needed to talk about just women in general, women's health, specifically speaking to Black women and Black women's health. Let's start with Ms. Netta.
Yeah.
How did you get into being a doula?
So, really quickly, I was in Tampa, Florida, and one of my friends was pregnant. Her name is Darlene. Hey, Darlene. And so she would have been birthing by herself. And so myself and two of our other friends was there with her to help support her at the hospital. And I was that friend that every time the doctor or the nurse said some type of medical terminology or asked to do something to her body, I was asking her, did she want that? Looking up the different words, like if the doctor said, oh, do you want an epidural? I was like, what's the epidural? What's the, benefits and the risk of it? And so after that entire experience, she had a healthy baby boy. And she also mentioned that I should be a doula. And I didn't know anything about that. My goal after grad school was going to work in the health department. And so I looked into that. I wanted to pursue it, and I wasn't able to pursue it while I was in Tampa. So when I moved up to St. Louis, an opportunity came with True over at Jamai Birth Village. She was doing a training, and I took that training, and I've been hooked ever since.
For me, my story is a little bit different from Bonetta's. I had a few different types of birthing experiences, some really, really great, some really not so great, some that I learned a lot from, and others that I wish, I had just knew about beforehand. And with my fourth pregnancy, me and my husband, we selected to have a little bit more of an alternative birthing opportunity. And so instead of having our baby at a hospital, I received all my care at a birth center by midwives, and it was amazing. And I really got to see just the different, like how different it is having your baby and being treated for your pregnancy in a more medical-based model versus a more holistic patient-centered model. And so when I was being treated at that birth center, my midwives did an amazing job of educating me and making sure I had resources. And they also spoke with me about, I believe that at that point, me and my husband had been the only Black family that they had worked with maybe that particular year. And so they were very like, hey, you need to be aware of institutional racism, and you need to be aware of your stressors, and this is how it can affect your baby, and X, Y, and Z, and really giving me the tools and empowerment to choose how I carried my baby. And so after my baby was born, I remember just being like, why don't other people know this? Why don't people in my community know this? Why is the messaging behind birth filled with pain? Get the epidural, trust the doctor, do whatever they say, and not so much of, well, what do you want? how do you feel? What do you want your birth to look like?
Absolutely.
And I just felt like that was taking away from us and our experiences, because pregnancy is something that you should celebrate, and it should be, just like this celebration of life. And I really was feeling like my experiences with hospital births, and the lack of choice and control that I didn't realize I had, that played a really large part for me, and just being like, okay, we need to fix this problem. We need to fix it. And then by getting into it, I really started to learn how bad it was for women who look like me. But the way that I essentially came across, and got certified was, I was on Facebook one day, and I had been looking at doula certifications. But when everything happened with COVID and like life was at a standstill, I was like, all those times I talked about if I could do this or if there was time, I was like, let's do it. Let's do it right now. So I literally like signed up for a like orientation type like debrief of what the training was about 1 week, like the week that everything shut down in March. And then I want to say April 1st, I started my training to become a doula. So I was not playing them games about it.
I know that's right.
So what exactly is the difference between a doula and a midwife? I've always thought that doulas were specifically for at-home births, and midwives were the same thing.
So, I mean, a midwife is somebody who is trained to do medical based work in pregnancies and with women just in general. So if they are, still in that childbearing time, age of life, they can do like pap smears and things of that nature, and a lot more medical based needs for clients. And there's training that you have to go through as a midwife. Me and Netta were actually talking about this a little bit earlier. So under the umbrella of midwife, you have your certified nurse midwife, and those individuals go to nursing school, and then they continue on through education to get a specialization in midwifery. And then you have your certified professional midwives, and they go through an apprenticeship and have to help with a certain amount of births, and doing certain things for that total number of births. And then a doula, we do a lot of emotional, educational, and physical support, and making you aware of your options. We don't do anything for you medically. We don't do any of the things that the midwives do as far as like, cervical checks or any of those pieces. We're there definitely just to help you get through those processes in those times. And then also to make sure that you're educated, and, we support your family. We support your support system.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I know that I brought you guys on here specifically to speak about women's health and Black women's health in general, but why is it so important for women to have the knowledge on a healthy pregnancy outside of just a healthy life?
I think as a Black woman in our community, and also Indigenous women in our communities, we only understand trauma. And so sometimes when it comes to the joy of creating life and birthing, we don't necessarily understand how to find the joy in it. And so sometimes when it comes to that journey, we only listen to the nurses, we only listen to the doctors, but we also realize that our healthcare system, though it has changed some, it is still rooted in racism and has people who have biases and things like that. And so we have to be mindful that when we have families going into these systems, that they understand what they have, what makes up their entire experience. And so as a doula, you are helping to create that safe space, helping to let women know, hey, this is how you feel most empowered in your birth. And that includes your nutrition, that includes your mental health, that includes releasing stressors if you can, or minimizing stressors, because as we know, as Black people, you have that generational stress or trauma, but then you also have the stressors of everyday, day-to-day life. And so because we already have those generational stressors that science has said is already in us when we are born, then we know that we have to try to control our outside stressors as much as possible. And so as a doula, letting families know that, because some families don't know. Some families are like, look, this is my day to day. This is what it is. You know, I eat White Castles every day. That's just what it is. And so not necessarily trying to make them change or judging them, but meeting them where they are. So if you know they eat McDonald's, then you're like, okay, so you can only, you eat McDonald's for lunch. That's what you eat. We know it. Okay, so what on McDonald's menu can we incorporate to make sure that that baby and you are getting the nutrients that you need for you to thrive and for you to have a safe pregnancy and postpartum period?
That leads into what's the I guess the death rate or the statistics behind Black women in pregnancy. I mean, are we still losing Black women during childbirth as rapid as, you know, back in the day?
I mean, we're definitely losing Black women at a much higher rate than any other racial classification of women. I actually believe now, as Black women, we're more likely to die during childbirth than previous generations. And I'm pretty sure that's a study that I read, and it has, much like Netta said, a lot to do with the racial barriers that are there. The lack of listening from providers when somebody says, you know, like they're in pain or that something is hurting them or that something doesn't feel right, or, you know, I mean, the list goes on and on, as far as like what provider abuse looks like in birthing situations. But definitely when you look at the amount of people who say they've experienced abuse by the hands of their providers in the birthing environment, as well as the statistics that Black women die 4 times, like the rate that we die is 4 times higher than our white counterparts. And so that also plays a large part. Those two statistics together, they're not in our favor.
Yeah. And then also thinking about those stressors, like, so as I'm sure both of you all probably came across when you were pregnant and were about to deliver, you heard these same statistics, and that's stress too. So on top of like wanting to have a successful birth, you are also thinking like, oh man, am I gonna die? So then it's just like, you know, as a doula, trying to like switch it around, like, because like I said earlier, we are always talked about in a trauma lens, and it doesn't create a healthy narrative for Black women when it comes to birth, you know. So now the discussion, although people still lead with that, we're 4 times more likely to die, things like that, we also can spin it around and say, but with the help of a doula, a support system, you know, having all of the tools needed to navigate the birthing process, we have found in birth, you know, research has shown that women are more likely to survive, especially Black women.
Yeah.
With the doula.
Yeah.
With the doula, with support, with resources, you know, your insurance company, when they, I know, I forget what insurance that is, but they do the postpartum meals for moms. It'll come to me. But it's one Medicaid that does this, and they literally do postpartum meals for the first 6 weeks, and they send you 15 meals, or first 2 weeks they send you 15 meals first, and then 15 meals after. And I can't tell you the difference of a postpartum experience for a mom who don't have that and a mom who does, and that's regardless if that mom has a husband or not, you know, has a partner or not, because you need that support. There is research by Jenny Joseph down in Florida. She actually just recently opened up the first Black midwifery school, and she is amazing. Oh my God, I love Jenny Joseph. And she, you know, talks about this in her childbirth. What is it called? Equal. Help me out, Keesha. Do you know?
Is it like equal equity?
Common sense.
Common sense birth.
Common sense birth. Yeah.
Yeah. There
and
we
she
go.
kind of talks about that. I mean, she literally did research over an extended amount of time, made sure that these families had wraparound care. And just like you would at schools, you know, different schools, they make sure that these kids have wraparound care, therapists, They have food. They have people that they can talk to, connections, so they connect them with other students. She took that same model and applied it to birthing women, especially indigenous and Black women.
Right.
And she proved it. You know, she had a higher, I think she had no fatalities of moms or babies.
Really?
Thriving,
Yeah.
research. I mean, you
Because
can't
it
make it
makes a
up.
big difference. It makes such a, I mean, Tommy, it makes such a big difference when a mother is supported. Like the amount, like her ability to bring awareness to things that are going on with her. Like if you don't feel like anybody's going to listen to you, if you don't feel like you have somebody to talk to, you're just going to continue to keep those things inside of you. And so that support system is so important from the beginning all the way to the end, because you know there's certain things that I feel like just culturally, because grandma says do it, we do it. And it's like, you know, we love grandma, but you know. So that is a huge part of it. And you know, our support systems, I think it's great that our support systems typically incorporate, like, you know, our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunts, but definitely support systems should also incorporate our cousins and our sisters and our friends, because those are definitely going to be the people who are much more able to get to the information and willing to accept information that maybe our older generations or, you know, our predecessors aren't as willing to take on.
I totally agree with that. And y'all make me feel like I should have definitely had a doula. When I text Netta earlier, I think I told you that you did reach out to me around the time my mom passed. Like it was real random. And she had reached out to me and just asked me like if I wanted one and if I needed some help. And I think at that time, because of the lack of education on exactly what a doula was, and I was comparing it to a midwife, I just, you know, my headspace was like not there. But when having my baby, I heard you telling Netta earlier about your birthing experience with your son. And I went through pretty much the same exact thing. Like, you know, with me and my OB, we were fighting against my blood pressure and all that, but I only had an MD that I saw every now and then who was Black, who was able to go in more detail as to why my blood pressure being so high was very serious to my health and pregnancy. And I mean, from time to time, it would slip my mind, but it really came into play when I went into labor, and I didn't go into labor on my own. I was induced. Now that I know the effects of being induced, I will not like encourage to be induced next time. That's not going to happen. And then I did have an epidural. I literally, they were bringing the needle out of my back at the same time that they lost her heartbeat. And I think they probably waited around and tried to find the heart rate for maybe 2 minutes. After that, they just started pushing me towards the back, and I'm steady like, okay, what's going on? And they were not communicating with me, and that's what created the fear. I'm steady like, is everything okay? What's going on? She told me that they lost the heartbeat, but of course they downplayed it. Just give us a minute. And then the epidural started kicking in, and it wasn't what I expected. I didn't think I would get lightheaded and woozy from it. And I'm trying to let them know that how I'm feeling, and no one is talking to me. They push me to the back, and I'm being put on the table, and they're encouraging me to calm down, be chill about it. I get on the table. I can literally feel whatever the heavy thing is that they put on top of you. Felt it, and then I could feel them poking me with the knife. When they went to cut me, I lost my mind. I could not believe that I can feel that. And I'm like trying to tell them, but they're forcing the oxygen mask on me. So I'm like mumbling, I'm assuming, to them. And so something in my I'm gonna just say it. My mama came to me and was like, kick, scream. So I just started like acting the fool on this table, and the lady pulled the mask off and was like, what's wrong? She was frustrated, first off. And she was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I can fucking feel it. And I just blacked out. I don't remember what happened after that. I wasn't able to hold my baby. Like, I would say for at least the first 8 hours, it felt like all day. I had her probably at 9 that morning. I didn't hold her to probably like 4 or 5. It felt like an all day thing. It wasn't until I got into a room, got comfortable, that I was like, okay, I'm calmed down off the morphine enough to hold her. I was numb, and I don't feel like I got not just the birthing experience, but the bonding. I didn't get that bonding time with her. After experiencing that and thinking that I'm about to die, because like Benita said, that was the first thing that I thought about. 4%, at four out of how many women die, and I just thought that was my time. I didn't have my mom there for my support, even though I had a slew of family that was there. That wasn't it. And then I don't think my partner just had the education and the coach on how to coach me during that, because it was hectic. And it wasn't until the day after that I lost my mind in the hospital room. Like, I literally could have died. Like, I just buried my mama and I went through a whole life or death situation. I didn't know how to handle that. So a doula would have been very vital to my birthing experience. Because especially after the whole process, I didn't know how to accept that. Coming home, looking at my mom's picture and things like that, I will go right back to the moment that I can feel that knife. That's what freaks me out. I can literally feel them like cutting through my skin, and I blacked out after that. I don't remember anything. I don't have videos of nothing. So it's like,
Tommy, I would strongly encourage you to get a postpartum therapist. And I know that, that level of trauma is I don't want to say it's unfathomable, because I know it happens. I've seen it happen, but it's so heart-wrenching, because it's like that experience is going to be with you forever. And at some point you're going to have the skills to learn how to cope with that, and to really to digest it. Because like, if you do want to have another baby, or just even if you don't want to have another baby, if your daughter decides to grow up and have a baby, like, what we typically do is we push those same experiences off on our children. So like when we experience that trauma in birth, like, oh, it hurts so bad. I was in labor for 40 something. Like, we scare our little girls and create this like this paradox in their mind, like birth equals pain. But like
birth equals death. Because in my mind, I was thinking flowers, roses, me and my baby gonna have on this matching outfit. These pictures gonna be fire. I didn't have my toes done or my nails done, so I was ate up. But still, I thought the whole process would have been a lot smoother than it was. And I told Netta that, definitely second baby, I want to do it. I need that emotional support, because the first experience has created that fear that I don't want to go through that. And I have blood pressure. I have hypertension now at 29 years old, and it's so fickle with my body, regardless of what I'm trying to do health wise, that it does scare me to go into another pregnancy thinking that it's just going to be the same result.
Girl, and that's facts. Like, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure at 18 years old. I mean, I was a national swimmer. I'm swimming 3-4 miles a day. That was probably the best shape I had ever been in, and was diagnosed with high blood pressure. So with every single one of my pregnancies, that is always something that I'm extra vigilant about. Like, we're vegetarians and we don't eat meat, because that's how I manage that particular ailment. And like, every single baby I have, I'm like, ooh, I hope that blood pressure don't pop up this go around, because it can be so scary. Like, I actually was induced with one of my children because I went to the doctor's office and they were like, oh, we got to take the baby out. Your blood pressure is just too high. And in that moment, I wish I had been empowered enough to ask, well, what is my blood pressure? Because after I started talking to advocates and talking to people who were birth workers about that particular experience, they were like, it doesn't sound like you really had an issue where they needed to take the baby out right then and there. Like, he was actually probably my second smoothest birth.
Mhm.
Like, went really good. But it is unfortunate, and I think that that's a lot of what happens is like we as a people need to, before hospitals were a thing for us, and before the people who owned our ancestors, sent them to hospitals to have babies, like, we were delivering our own babies. We were caring for our own sisters. And it was like, that was the knowledge. Like, this is what you do when somebody, in your family or somebody in your group is having a baby. You take care of them. And we've just really gotten away from that as a culture because we trust our medical systems. We trust our systems.
Right.
Our systems more than we should. We don't question. And we really need to be more whole as a people to really understand, like how you're talking about your partner, he wasn't really equipped. Like, these Black fathers got to be ready to advocate for these Black mothers, like, for real.
So what are the benefits that you would say comes out of having a home birth?
I mean, home births are just, they're a different vibe. There's not a whole lot of clock. You're not up against the clock for a lot of things. Your home is your personal space, so your body is able to be relaxed and knows that it's safe. And your body has experienced life in this space and knows, like, I am okay. This is a good place. This is a safe space. And you have autonomy and control of what's going on when you have a home birth. Like, nobody's going to come up behind you and stick you with something that you told them you don't want, or you don't have to be attached to a monitor the whole entire time. There's just a lot. It's just a different, just a totally different vibe that goes with a home birth versus really anything else, but definitely in comparison to a hospital birth. But I'm sure Netta probably has something she could say about home births too, because they really are just phenomenal.
I love home births. I think they are just, like she said, the vibe of it all. You get to create the environment that you want, way more laid back. But I will say that I have seen that environment recreated in a hospital as well. So to me, I feel like it's really about who you have on your team. I always talk to my clients about what's in your toolbox, and what's in your toolbox. Like, you need to have health professionals that are on your side. One particular hospital up here, they asked the moms, did you write a birthing plan? Blew my mind, because that made me realize, like, okay, they care about what this mom wants. Now, granted, things don't always go as planned, of course, but at least that mom knows that coming in here, I'm safe, I am heard. In a home birth, I like home births. I think they are, like, really nice. As a doula in a home birth, you got to do a little bit more work because there is no nurses there. So you are cooking the meals, you are making the beds and cleaning the linen. So it's way more nurturing. It's like a very sacred space. As doulas, we create the sacred space for families. In the hospital, it's kind of hard to create the sacred space that that will help this mama to thrive. Because you've been talking to this mom through prenatal sessions. She shared her fears, she shared her excitements, her wants, her needs, and also the partner. The partner has shared his or her wants, needs, fears. And so being at home, you are able to really kind of navigate that process. Keep people at ease, turn all the lights out without somebody busting in the room talking about, let me take your blood pressure, things like that. Midwives are, I didn't see the midwife work in complete darkness because they know that the mama needs whatever space they need. Whereas in a hospital, at certain hospitals, the doctor, come right in, turn the lights on. And that's where doula come in, or the partner come in and be like, hey, turn the light back off. But,
or they come in with like 20 med school students.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
People like, press wide open. But Tommy, you also said something that I really thought that I wanted to touch on, because I felt like this is one thing that I really enjoy as a doula. Like, generally speaking, in their practice, like, I feel like a lot of people are like, okay, I'm gonna get a doula and start working with my doula around like 30 weeks or 25 weeks or whatever the case may be, like further along in their pregnancy, like middle of the second trimester, third trimester time frame, which is great. Like, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I will definitely say, like, there is nothing more empowering than sitting down with the client and like creating a list of interview questions for them to ask their provider. That sets the tone for what is happening. Nobody in a like as far as like who is involved on the birthing team outside of the mother and baby, like nobody else is really like has to be there. Like, the mom has to be there to have the baby, and the baby has to be there in order to be born. Like, those are the only two people that really need to be there. And what tends to happen is, and Netta touched on this, is that white coat syndrome. Like, we fall victim to it, but they do too. If you let them think that
Tom Lane here. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe to this channel. Also, slap on that notification bell so that way you are the first to know when I post new content. Thumbs up your favorite and pass on the word.
Every Thursday with Tom Lane.